All right, Stephanie with the patient story again, joined still by Sara, who just got done talking about how you found the ovarian cancer, treatment decisions that you made, and the way you broke the news, all these different things. But now we're going to talk about the actual treatment, and I know you had different chapters here, starting with the debulking surgery, which I know was a huge surgery. It was a big deal. Talk to us about what that experience was, especially for people who are going to go through one themselves.
Okay. So my experience, I was in the hospital still from my first surgery. We decided that it was best. I was already had a bowel prep. A lot of times that if I was not in the hospital, I would have had to do a bowel prep again. So since I'd already gone through that, we kept me in the hospital. Having my medical background, I think made things a little bit kind of wishy-washy at times, where I knew what to expect, but then I also didn't want to expect some things. So I knew that I wanted to get out of the hospital. So I, like, again, I'm a firm believer that you need to have communication with your team. You need to advocate for yourself. I was like, what's going to get me out of the hospital faster? What's going to have a faster recovery? I had talked to my doctor about that, and we talked about doing a nerve block versus an epidural at surgery time, because I was like, an epidural keeps me in the hospital longer, and nerve block would be less. And then I also begged my doctor not to staple me shut. So there's, the surgery was basically going in, you're making a giant incision from kind of right below the rib cage all the way down to the pubis bone, and opening up and taking out what needs to be taken out, and doing biopsies and checking things and all this and that. So it's kind of, you end up with an incision like this long, and you sometimes I would kind of forget that I had this major surgery, because it is major. Everything's kind of taken out and put back together and this and that. And they looked at things, and I do feel that, it's one of those things that you don't kind of see that once you had surgery. You see like the actual incision, you don't see what they've done on the inside. My surgery was like 7 hours long, I think. So I ended up waking up in the recovery room with no nerve block, not any pain medication on board. They thought I was too sedated, so they didn't do it, and I was in excruciating pain from not having that. Still do not regret the fact that I didn't do a epidural, because once the nerve block worked, it was, really, really good. I, as a, pediatric surgery nurse, I knew that number one was I had to get up the next day. I got back out of the OR probably at, I don't know, it was probably 10, 11 o'clock at night is when I got back. So I was also very firmly telling them before surgery that I didn't want to remember going into the operating room. I remembered going into the operating room my first surgery, and I remembered it was just cold and sterile, and I was alone, and I was scared. So I begged the anesthesiologist to give me some more like kind of medicine to keep me like kind of in la la land before surgery. Again, a little bit of my control, just wanting to kind of not be there at that moment. I feel like a lot of it was just trying to escape those moments. So I ended up having the surgery the next morning. I woke up and I was like walking. I was like, we have to walk. I need to get in my normal clothes. I went out of this gown. And so I ended up coming off pain meds pretty fast. Ended up walking as much as I could. I was kind of just moving around as soon as I could. I got moving. My nurses were great. I ended up having to go home with the Foley, which was, that's when I feel that like a lot of things kind of hit home. The pain was bad from the surgery, but it was never, I never felt that it was like so bad. I was pretty physically fit beforehand. I felt strong. I knew that like my arms were strong to help me get in and out of bed. My legs were strong to get me in and out of bed. I just tried to not use my abdominal muscles. I kind of, just from being a nurse and knowing positioning and stuff like that, it was really easy for me to kind of get moving. The fatigue was something that started hitting at that time, where I'm like, wow, oh my God, I walk down the hallway and I want to take a nap now. And so that's a lot of things that I fought. I fought the resting after surgery. I do remember I had talked with my doctor as soon as I was diagnosed and said, I'm not going to be okay. I want to talk to somebody. And they did send a psychologist in there I think she may have come in the day before surgery, but she came and found me like the day after my surgery, like later on that day. And I'm like, just kind of like crying. And she's like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I'm tired and this and that. And she's like, why don't you sleep? Like, I was just trying to entertain everybody. So it's kind of hard to take care of yourself. You kind of forget that like you're a patient. You kind of are like, okay, there's people here. I need to stay awake. And my family was like, just sleep, just sleep, just take a nap. And so it was very hard for me to like step back and be like the patient and be like, oh, your body needs this. Your body needs rest.
Mm.
Then like the next day, I'm like, oh God, I'm like, I've been sitting there just sleeping all the time. I'm like, wow, this is I'm like, I felt much better. And I kind of was like, okay, like I felt that there was so much of me that knew what to do, but then so much of me that like needed to be told what to do.
Mhm.
And that's where like my two worlds were kind of clashing, where like I was like, I want to be better and I want to be home. And then the other part of me was like, you're not there. And so like I kind of was this kind of meeting in the middle kind of situation after surgery.
Right. No, I'm glad you brought that point up too, because oftentimes it's like, yeah, you have visitors and then there are these people, and then you feel like, oh, I gotta take care of them because they're here to see me, and you're trying to reciprocate or whatever. But it's so important to draw that boundary. Like, no, this is, I'm going through a
Mhm.
lot. I will be going through a lot. I need to maintain that space for myself, right? That's what I'm hearing you
Right.
say. Um, so in terms of the recovery, how long did it take? Because I know you had two surgeries within 3 days, but or a few days, but how long did it take for you to recover in terms of like when you started feeling I pretty much back to normal again?
I honestly can, I mean, as far as like surgical, it was probably 2 months, if not longer. I felt really good at my like 3.5 week post-op visit with my doctor. I started chemo about 3 weeks after surgery. So I didn't really get, it
Mm,
was like almost like, okay, like now this is just happening. So it kind of was like where like I felt I was doing much better after about like probably 14 days after surgery. I was much, much better. I, again, was stubborn. My brother had his bridal shower. My brother, like sister-in-law, had a bridal shower the Saturday. I got out of the hospital Friday and the bridal shower was Saturday. And I went. I made my, I was, it was one of those things that my brother had taken such good care of me. I was so excited for their shower. I needed to be there. It was, do I regret it? Not at all, but it was so much. It was very exhausting, but I did it, and I'm so happy that I did do it. I was miserable the entire time, but I kind of about 14 days after, I was able to get in and out of bed, doing things, moving around. The Foley was gone. Things were much, much better. As far as working out, my doctor at about 3 weeks told me I could start a 3 or 4 weeks, like, you could kind of do more. I had a 5 pound weight restriction from surgery until 6 weeks. So I was only allowed to lift like 5 pounds until 6 weeks. I think it was 4 weeks of no driving, was what I was allowed. As with most people, they know that like narcotics cause constipation. So I kind of weaned myself off the narcotics as fast as I could. I went to just Motrins, clean Tylenols. I didn't want to take them. I didn't want to take any medicine. I kind of every single time I went to my doctor, I'm like, can we stop taking this one? Can we stop taking that one? And he's like, just let this happen for a while. So at about probably 4 weeks, I started like light jogging. And then once he gave me the go ahead, I started to kind of lift weights again. But it was probably at least 3 months until I could do like a sit up. Like it was, I kept getting mad that I would do sit ups. And if I could do them the next day, I was in excruciating pain. And I like, everyone would be like, you did have a major surgery. I had to be like reminded all the time because I was so mad that everything else was starting to work and that was not working.
right.
So I kind of kept I played the whole game that I tell my patients this, like, if it hurts, don't do it. If
Right.
it's sore, it's kind of okay. So I kind of went with like, okay, like I just can't do abs. And I
Right.
would every like once a week, I would try to do it again. And then I would be like, not time yet. So I kind of just kept playing around with that. So I probably would say at about 3 months, I was like fully surgically healed. But probably at about like 6 weeks, I was feeling like much more my normal self.
Okay. Okay, that's good. And of course, everyone tracks differently, but that gives a little bit of picture, right? And
Mhm.
keep in mind, of course, that you were fit and young going into
Right.
this too. So that all plays a role. You mentioned the Foley. If you could just describe that experience and any guidance for people who are going to have to deal with one themselves.
I had the first surgery happened and they had to do like some stuff where they had to kind of check the bladder because part of the cyst was like kind of against the bladder. So I ended up getting like my urethra was basically pretty swollen. So the next day, the July 4th, I was in and out of the bathroom, like kind of like peeing enough. And then I was kind of like, I just didn't feel that I was peeing enough. And like, so they kind of asked me like, how are you peeing? And so like, after communicating with that, I was like, I don't know if I am emptying my bladder all the way. So they did like a bladder scan and they were like, you have over a liter in your bladder right now. And I was like, oh, I don't really have to pee that bad. So then I went to the bathroom and I peed, and like I peed literally like 800 mLs, and they bladder scanned me for a liter still. So they have no idea how much I had in there because I bladder scanned for a liter again. And I just gone. So they were like, you're not empty in your bladder. We have to put a Foley catheter in. They kind of talked about just doing like a straight cath just to do a one time only to empty my bladder. But my nurse kind of was like, no, she's had this surgery. She kind of pushed for me not to. So it was probably the most embarrassing experience being a nurse. Then they have to basically, you're naked from the waist down, you're spread eagle. My nurse couldn't get it. The charge nurse couldn't get it. The resident came in to try to do it. They had to get a Foley catheter from like the children's hospital because it was so swollen. So then like once they got it, it was, I mean, it was not horribly painful, honestly. Like I was really hyped up that it was going to be more painful than it was to going in. I mean, it wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't like kind of devastating kind of thing. And then it kind of was not bad because it was just kind of like, okay, like I'm just peeing now. I don't have to get up and pee. It's great. I was just walking around with the catheter. And it was astonishing how much urine was coming out, and the fact that I was not peeing beforehand by any means. But, and then my doctor decided at surgery we were going to keep it. So I just, at that point, they did change it out in surgery, but to a regular sized one, and it was not painful. It wasn't even the fact that I had a Foley. It was more so that like it was fine. I was okay with this. I'm comfortable with this. I knew what it was. It was not going to stay permanently. It was when I got home that I was home with a catheter that a lot of things hit in that like this is real. This happened. You know, when I'm in the hospital, you're in the hospital and you've got like, okay, everything's going on. You have IVs, you have all these things going on. You go home and you're kind of like, oh wait, this is my home hasn't changed, but I have changed. And that was a lot, which even as a nurse, I wasn't prepared for that. And I didn't even know that kind of thing. I knew parents, like, you know, you go home and it's harder. And I always just thought it was, you just didn't have the help there. It wasn't that I didn't have the help there. I was totally fine to get myself in and out of bed and do all of my things on my own. It was more that I went home and reality like hit like the day I got home.
Right. It's just the juxtaposition of, like you said, the home's the same, everything else is the same, but your situation isn't. So, and it moved so fast for you, Sarah. I mean, you were discharged mid-July, July 12th, and then August 2nd was the start of chemo. So, I mean, it's just like bam, bam, bam. And I know you said you went wig shopping ahead of time. That was just to prepare. You felt like you just wanted to be in control in case.
Yeah. So I had not really known much about cold caps. Funny enough, one of my friends at work, we were talking about the fact that I had to have the surgery, and I was like, what if it is cancer? And kind of like, oh my God, like we actually probably should kind of think about that. And so she's like, my aunt or someone did cold caps. We're going to keep your hair. It's going to be fine. And I was like, okay, I'm not entirely sure I know anything about this. And I never heard anything about cold caps, but it somehow I feel like someone put it in my head, and I love my hair. I hated it when I was younger, but I love my hair. It's thick and it's like exactly how I want it to do. It works how I want it. I'm like, I cannot lose my hair. I need to keep my hair. And so I was very much like, okay, we're going to do that. But it was also you don't know if it's going to work. My doctor had convinced me that it wasn't going to work. He didn't really have anyone that did it. You know, it was more of a breast cancer thing that people had cold caps for. Even the cold caps company told me that, you know, they don't know for the most part on some chemos. Some chemos they can say yes, but other chemos they don't know. You have to wear the cold cap an hour before chemo starts, and then for I think it was 2 hours after, and then the entire time during. So I was very much that I was like, I don't know if it's going to work. My brother's wedding was going to be in the end of September. I do not want to be bald for his wedding. He was like my rock this entire time. I mean, we have so many things that like actually now we can laugh about during chemo in that time frame. But so I was like, I can't be bald for his wedding. And so I wanted to find a wig. I wanted to have something in case it happened. For the most part, your hair falls out a little bit at a time and then it's just gone. So it's kind of like I didn't want to wait till it was gone to have to be like, what is going to happen? I wanted to have a plan. So I did. I went to a wig shop, and it was an old lady wig shop, and it was horrible. I was like, this is terrible. This is not going to go well. I was like this. I didn't get much help from my doctors. They were kind of like, my doctor himself, I didn't even ask him, but the nurses there, I was like, where do I go? And they kind of were like, we don't know, just go somewhere. And I was like, really? Like, you're an oncology office, you don't have these options. I ended up finding this place called Wigs for Kids that they do mostly kids. She started out doing adults, but then switched over to doing kids. And she was a godsend and an amazing. I went in there, we tried on a bunch of different wigs, and she's like, this, she said that, you know what, the wig that I picked out was almost identical to my hair. Like in the pictures that we had taken with the wig on, no one could tell that it was not my hair. And so and she's like, I will actually end up using this wig for someone else later down the line. I'm sure of it. It's a great wig. She's like, we can just hold it. She's like, we'll hold it till your brother's wedding and then we'll go from there. And so my brother's wedding was about 8 weeks into chemo. So I was like, okay, like I'm either probably not going to have hair then, or it's going well. So she said she would keep it till my brother's wedding so that way, worst case scenario, I did have some kind of hair for his wedding. So that's where like I had that like kind of on the back burner where I'm like, and then she was just a great woman that, helped me with different, like, making sure that I had disposable makeup stuff so that way, like, I didn't get any extra infections. I ended up having some therapy sessions with their social worker at Wigs for Kids. And so it's kind of came a little bit full circle once, I didn't actually ever get a wig there, but I ended up having some therapy sessions there. I did a donation to the company, to them. It was kind of where I just landed there. It was an amazing place to have landed though.
Sounds like a great service, but the best part of it is, I mean, you didn't need it because the cold caps did work, right? And so that's fabulous, because I know sometimes it's like it may work or it may work partially.
Right.
So we talk about the hair loss, you were able to prevent it, but the chemo part of it, could you describe your actual regimen? So the drugs that you were taking and how often and how many cycles?
Yeah. So I lost all of my hair besides my hair in my head. I lost probably about 25% of my hair. So it was still very nerve wracking all through chemo that I would like wash my hair and then like there'd be hair and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, is it going to be too much? My hair did decently thin. So with the cold caps, I had to I think everything was like all natural I needed to use. I could only wash my hair in ice cold water. So I would have to like take a regular shower, then get out of the shower, hang my head over the sink, wash it with ice cold water, no blow dryer, no heat, no nothing. So it was kind of, at some point I'm like, this is worse than anything than just shaving my head at this point. But my chemo, my doctor decided to do dose dense chemo for ovarian cancer where it's carboplatin and Taxol. So I did carboplatin, I did 6 cycles. But since it was weekly, I did carboplatin every 3 weeks and then Taxol every week. So I would get, starting out, I do both of them. And then the next 2 weeks, I would just do Taxol. And then the week after those 2 were done, I would start up the carboplatin again. My carboplatin and Taxol weeks were miserable. It was like my double chemo week. I was there much, much longer. It was the week that I would get the sickest. The first chemo, I kind of was very surprised and like, this is easy. This isn't that bad. And in hindsight, it's funny to me because I feel that that's where everybody kind of is. Like you've never gotten chemo. Your body's kind of like a little bit adjusting. And then like, it's like round 4. I'm like, oh my God, I basically might be dying. Like, what is this? Like, it's much worse. And you kind of still try to play the game. You're like, I'm not that sick. I'm not that sick. And it gets harder, obviously. I ended up, after round 2, I think it was, my counts had gotten really low. My ANC is what, they were monitoring. It was very, very low. I had to skip a week and then like I came back the next week and my numbers were exactly the same the week before that they were the week before. And that's something that even talking to other people that have had cancer treatments, that like when you go to chemo and then get told you can't get chemo is devastating. It's you're ready for chemo, you're ready for like the battle of chemo, and then they tell you to go home. And like for me, like I had cold caps. I have like 2 people there that are going to help with cold caps. They've taken off work. They're here for me today. And like now I'm like, and I have all this dry ice for the cold caps. So we've drugged this giant thing in here. And they're like, okay, go home. And I'm like, no, I can't go home. I need chemo. And I would literally point out to someone in the chemo suites that was like laying there like half asleep. Like they look like they were like dying. I'm like, they're getting chemo. Why can't I get chemo? I'm walking in here just fine. So it was hard. We ended up adding on some Neupogen, and because like I couldn't do the Neulasta because I was getting chemo every week, and Neulasta you have to have more of a break. So we started adding on Neupogen. So I would get my double chemo, and then the next week I would get like just the Taxol, and then the following week I would get my Taxol and then the Neupogen. So it kind of was one of those things that I made it to my brother's wedding just fine. I actually had skipped 2 weeks, the week of my brother's wedding the week before, because I was just couldn't get it. So it kind of worked out well that I was feeling the probably best at his wedding because I hadn't gotten chemo in 2 weeks. But it kind of reared right back up. And so then it was one of those things that like I would get my double chemo. I would be miserable from my chemos were always on Thursdays. And then Friday I felt great. I like, all the steroids and all like everything was just kind of kicking on Friday. Saturday at about noon, it happened. I knew it was like at noon. I would go to the gym Friday and I would go to the gym Saturday morning, and it would be like, I have to get home by noon because I'm going to turn into like a pumpkin and I need to go and not come out of my house for 3 days. And so I would go home from, about noon Saturday, I would feel miserable. And then I worked on Mondays and I was still like able to work, but not the best. And then by Tuesday, I felt good. And then unfortunately, by Thursday, I was back in the chemo chair. And so the weeks that I just got the Taxol was fine. I kind of was able to I was tired. I wasn't feeling the best, but I never was really bad. And then the following week, I got the Taxol, and then I got the Neupogen. And Neupogen's kind of like giving yourself like the flu. You had to do these shots. I did a shot once a day. Being a nurse, I'm not able to give myself shots. I had many people lined up to give me shots. I had my nurse friend stop by. I had to do heparin after the hospital for about a month, and then the Neupogen, and I never once gave myself an injection. I had an amazing group of friends and family. My brother, who is like an engineer for GM, learned how to give shots in the hospital because I was like, I can't do this. So he would come do my shots. We would do my shots in public. I mean, I was like, at this point, I'm like, I don't care where we're doing them. So he was very much, we would have a family dinner and he would be like, okay, let's do your shot. So I just never had to do my own shots. And so like we would do that. So it was those weeks where you had like the flu. Like as soon as like the Neupogen, I would do Neupogen Friday, Saturday, Sunday, typically. So pretty much by Saturday afternoon, I was like, okay, this is terrible. So my last 3 cycles of chemo, I had like 1 week that I felt fair. And then it was just like, I was so tired. It was just like a snowball effect. I feel like from like the 3rd round on that it was harder and it was harder and it was harder. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, okay, it's harder. And then the counts are always low. Everything's always low. I remember like blowing my nose. I was like right before my like second to last chemo, like blow my nose and just like, it's like bloody because like your platelets are like non-existent. I'm pale, I'm thin. I'm like, not like, I'm like, I want to sleep anywhere, like, but I'm not sleeping. I'm just awake all the time.
So I'm hearing fatigue was a big part of it for you, but you were able to go to work, which when I read that, I was like astounded because, I know different chemos, different impacts, but if you were to talk about, you said the Taxol and carboplatin weeks were the worst, right? Could you laundry list the side effects you felt, especially during that time? And also what helped you get over the side effects?
So my biggest side effects was, I mean, the number one was like the tired, the fatigue was number one. And then when I had the double chemo, it was like the nausea. Like I would go from normally like I didn't really have an appetite. With the carboplatin and Taxol, I was super nauseous. There's only a couple times that I actually got sick. I was I'm not a person that's a puker. And so I kind of was like, we want to do everything not to. So I pretty much ate blueberries and goldfish my entire chemo because it was the only thing that I liked and I tolerated. I kept my Zofran on hand. I would make sure that I took that kind of around the clock as soon as I started feeling that. And I was very much where I just wouldn't eat. I kind of made a plan with myself that if I could, I tried every time we had a different round. I tried a new thing, which every single time it failed, and nothing new was going to work. It was just chemo. The first round, I'm like, okay, just stay hydrated. Do your best to drink some water. If you're not going to eat, maybe you drink water and you'll be okay. The second round, I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work that well. So now maybe if we eat, because like I just wasn't hungry, I wasn't thirsty, but if I could force myself and not throw up, maybe I could kind of keep myself somewhat doing okay. And so I ended up just being like, you know what, if I can just drink some fluids, I'll keep myself, we just got to make it to Tuesday. Mine was just make it to Tuesday. Where like the fatigue, yes, I worked out. I only didn't work out. I'm trying to think of what days I didn't work out. Like I didn't work out on the night before chemo and chemo days. And then basically 4 or 5 days a week I worked out, and I worked 30 hours a week. It was because I had to work. I needed the money. I needed to financially keep myself afloat. And working out was something that was mine. So I was not giving that up. And none of them were done very well to my best ability. My work was very generous with being kind of understanding that I was more tired, letting me kind of be a little bit more kind of lazy with things. It was more that like I am a high energy person. So I kind of feel that like even like some of my friends would be like, okay, well, you're just like normal energy now. So like it's hard for me to be like I was here with my energy and then now I'm here. And then during chemo, I'm like way down here, like I'm still
Right.
functioning, but like no one really cared because I was still doing these things. And I'm like, you have no idea the energy it's taking me to do those things.
Right, right, right. But you knew how to balance. You were still listening to your body. You weren't like going at it 100% at the gym or at work,
Right.
right? Which is important to point out. I
Right.
know you finished chemo then in December, early December, and then it says just the next month, January of 2020, you started a clinical trial. So I was just curious what the your doctor had said in terms of why you needed to go to the clinical trial, and if you could describe what that was.
Yeah, so I actually skipped my very last chemo I did not get, which was just a Taxol dose. So I this photo is actually me on my not getting chemo day. So I missed my last dose because I showed up, my platelets were like 30, my like counts were like non-existent. So my doctor's like, you know what, it's a third of the dose. You've done all the doses. You're just done. He's like, you don't need to come back. We're just done. So December 5th, I finished chemo. December 12th is when I was supposed to get my last chemo. So then before that happened, we had talked about what the next step would be. For high grade clear cell ovarian cancer, there's nothing. It's a wait and see kind of game. My BRCA genes were negative. So it wasn't that we were going to go to this route because of that. My genetics, everything was normal. There was like a one gene of unknown variants, but they don't think that that means anything and obviously don't have a plan for that one. But it was very much a wait and see kind of game. And so then the trial nurse that works at the hospital, she came and talked with me. And then there's this trial that was going on. They were taking people that were BRCA negative and trying to see if PARP inhibitors and immunotherapy was going to help with them. And the key was that you had to start it, I think it was within 60 days of chemo ending or something. You had to start pretty fast after chemo ended. And so it kind of was a little bit where like they were very much, it's up to you. You don't have to, you don't need to do this. I was very much, I can't do nothing. Nothing drives me like off the deep end where I'm like this. I have researched so much. I have seen what the statistics are for ovarian cancer. I can't do nothing. Whether it helps me or it helps somebody else, I need to do something. And so I kind of was like, just okay, we're gonna go with the clinical trial. So chemo ended on like the 5th, but then the 12th I was there. So they had me come back a week later, which I came back a week later. My labs were still terrible. And so my doctor, it was like, we're gonna do Neupogen again because so I had to have my counts had to recover to start the trial. And I was all like, okay, it's like around Christmas, the new year, we're going to meet this new deductible. And I was all like, wet behind the ears. We're going to make sure that we get all these things done. So I needed to get like EKGs and all these things and like my Neupogen and all that stuff. And my urine samples to get all ready for the trial because now we have the holidays in the mix. And so that's where it kind of got like so fuzzy for me that like we had Christmas, we had New Year's, all this is what's going on. I'm still trying to get all my labs done every single week. I'm still in there twice a week sometimes because my accounts aren't getting better. And then the new year hit and then my insurance was being all weird. So then I needed Neupogen again. I did like 2 or 3 rounds of Neupogen after chemo ended just to get myself back to a normal count level so that way I could start the trial. And then we ended up doing my CT scan was at the end of chemo as well. So the month of December was jam packed full of like everything, and then including the holidays. Luckily for me, at some point during early chemo, probably like right after Halloween, I was like, I put my Christmas tree up because I didn't care, and I was like, I might get sick. I need this tree up. So, and I had Christmas shopping done whenever I could. So I kind of was like, didn't have anything I needed to do as far as because I was very much like, I don't know how sick I'm going to get. So I need to get like all my ducks in a row so that way, if I'm sick, I just don't have to do anything. So I very much was again controlling the situation where I would make sure that like, okay, I don't want to be a burden on someone else. I don't want to do this and that. I want to make sure that this is taken care of because I don't want to stress about it. So that's another thing that I feel is very important is that if something is weighing heavy on your brain, like whether it's I need to do Christmas shopping, I have a birthday party in a month and a half, but I don't know how I'm going to feel, do it now. Do whatever you need to do now. I did all of my stuff. So I was able to just do my doctor's appointments and rest. When chemo ended, a lot of like the stuff ended for everybody else. For like, my family wasn't coming to appointments as much anymore because I didn't need to do cold caps. And so it was very much like, I would go from work over to like the infusion center that was just across the street. I would get my IVs. I'm like in like, it's weird. I was like, I'm a nurse in like my nurse outfits and stuff like that. And then like, I'm going over here and like, I'm the patient. So I had some issues sometimes being like, I'm the nurse, I'm not the nurse, I'm the patient, I'm the patient in the morning and the nurse in the afternoon. It was a very weird kind of mix. But I was in the doctor's office literally like once a week, if not every 2 weeks, until I started the trial. And then I started the trial, which is, it could be a placebo. We don't know. So that was like kind of the thing about it, is that like, the oral med could be a placebo, and the IV infusion that I get once every 28 days could be a placebo as well. We'll know at the end of it. It's a 23-month trial. We're pretty convinced I'm on something just because of the side effects that I have. I would be really upset that this is the side effects that I'm having a year out of chemo if I didn't actually get some kind of medication. But so it's a twice a day pill that I take, and then the infusions once every 28 days. So we started with getting the pills for about a month. After 2 weeks, they checked my labs, and then like 2 weeks later, they checked it, and then we started the infusion. They checked me again. So now I'm at the point where I see my doctors once every 28 days. My CT scans are spaced out. Initially, they were like every 8 weeks, and I think they're like every 12 weeks now. And they're going to space out a little bit as well until we finish the trial, which should finish, I think, either December or January this coming year.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, because it's almost a 2-year trial. Do you know the names of the pill and the infusion?
It so they're PARP inhibitors, and then so it's actually funny because I really don't know exactly how to pronounce it. I think it's like Rucapra is like the one PARP inhibitor. It's not the one that most people are on, and I actually have zero clue how to say the other one. It's like somewhere. It's funny. My doctors would probably like be like, really at this point, because you have all.
Well, you know what? We'll
Um,
get that information later. Well, we'll like just insert it later because I wouldn't know
okay.
how to pronounce it anyway either. But it's interesting that it was really the hospital that knew. Well, there's this option, and I
Yeah.
love, I guess my last question here for you before we shift to the last segment is just, the whole point of taking part in a clinical trial, right? I mean, it's like it's 2 more years of treatment for you. It could help you, but it's not a guarantee. Like you said, you don't know what you're getting. But you also mentioned, hey, if it's not for me, it's for somebody else, right? So
Right.
you want to just like sum up that for us?
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things that from the beginning I was like, this is not real, this is not happening. And if I can be a voice, I want to be a voice. I feel like I didn't find anything on the internet with someone. I even asked my doctor, I said, where do I stand in a book? He's like, you're not in a book. He's like, I'm not going to find girls like me. I'm not going to find girls that have ovarian cancer at my age. I mean, somehow I have found a giant community, and it's great. But it's one of those things that like, there's not ones like me. And I wanted to make sure that people had like, someone to reach out to, or someone to know that has been there, that, is in their shoes, where, like I said, if it doesn't help me, like, then it shows that, like, wait, this doesn't work for someone else. I mean, my fate is my fate. I really like, obviously, like, I plan to live until I'm like 85. And so if I have to do this miserable treatment that's making me still tired, still all this and that, and see my doctors once every 28 days for the rest of my life, so be it.
Right.
It's a lot. It's kind of, it's one of those things that, that's like just that kind of part of it. Then like I get my CT scans is a different day than that. And then I'm still following with the breast center just because of my mom's history of that. And then like even just normal things in life. It's some months are a lot. Some months I don't see my doctors but once every 28 days. But it is something that I feel that, the clinical trial that I'm in there's like stages of clinical trials. There's some clinical trials or meds are brand new that they've never tried them on anybody. The PARP inhibitors, they've tried it. They just haven't tried it with certain girls. The IV infusion is stuff that they've tried with different kinds of cancers or different kinds of autoimmune diseases. So they knew the side effects to these medications. They knew what these medications would do to the, like, kind of how people would tolerate them. So that made me much more comfortable with being like, okay, let's just do it. I had an idea. I wasn't a very brand new drug that I
Right.
didn't know anything about.
But can you actually, the last question is the side effects. Can you list what those side effects are?
So the side effects of the oral medication, they lessen over time. Where like in the beginning, it was a bunch of nausea. I was just getting back from not having nausea. So then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, now I'm taking like Zofran again and all that stuff. But so like nausea is one, decreased appetite, and then like GI upset is a big one where like you just like a sour stomach kind of thing, and fatigue is another big one. Where I feel that every single time I go into my doctor, I'm like, I'm tired, I'm tired, I'm tired. They had told me that someone else was on the same trial and she slept for like 20 hours a day and they had to decrease her dose. And so they literally don't care because I'm still going to work and I'm going to the gym. I'm like, you have no idea. I'm like, I'm so tired. But it's not even like a tired, and it's some days is better than others. It's more of a tired, like I just don't want to do anything. Like I want to sit there and like stare at the wall, and I'm totally fine doing that. So it's more of that. And even in the gym, like I'll go to the gym and I'm like, I feel like every day at the gym is the same new day. Like it's the same first day of it. I'm trying to work out. I'm trying to run. I'm like not building any endurance. I'm not building any muscle. I'm just doing the same thing for the first time every time. So it does get very frustrating for me where I'm like, okay, I'm not making progress here. Why am I not? And like, some days I feel better. So it is kind of one of those things that I'm like, trying to balance that where just everyone's like it's the new normal. People are like you'll feel better after you're coming off of it.
Right.
It's more in like hot flashes, which hot flashes are part of postmenopausal like surgical menopause. So it's kind of like where it's a new lifestyle, but I also firmly don't want to stay it's like my new normal because I feel that there's certain things that are like triggers to people and certain things that are not to other people. Like to me, like telling me this is my new normal, I don't want this is not my new normal
Right.
because this isn't going to stay.
Yeah.
I'm going to hopefully as the years go, things will get even better as far as like I'm hopefully not as tired. I pick back up my energy a little bit. So this is just kind of like the season we're in.
Well, I love that too, the seasonality of it. And I lied. My last question really is because I know it said you're currently no evidence of disease, which is awesome and amazing. So when your doctors were telling you, oh, you should try this clinical trial, was it because they felt like, oh, this will really, increase the chances that you will not have recurrence? I mean, what was the reasoning behind it?
So yeah, so going on this medication was hopes of one of two things. So some girls will go on this medication. So there it is the PARP inhibitors are approved for some ovarian cancer, and sometimes it will help kind of stop the recurrence from getting worse. For like so it's kind of like where they like are like if you're no evidence of disease, they want to keep you there. So the goal is to keep me there and to hopefully with immunotherapy and the combination is that either we've gained ourselves 2 years with this trial, before we would have a recurrence, or it's one of those things that we just hopefully don't kind of have one come back. So it kind of is where the goal was that, you're going to be on this trial for, there's a couple different options. You're either going to be on it till the end. You're going to be on it until I decide, like I could tell them tomorrow, I don't want to do it anymore. And it's no questions asked, I'm done. If I wasn't tolerating it and my doctor felt that it was not safe anymore for me, he would pull me out of it. Or if I had a recurrence, then they would have to probably, it depends on the recurrence. If it was a notable recurrence, they would probably pull me from the study and say obviously it's not working
Right.
kind of situation.
Okay. And so had your doctor characterized to you that your kind, the high grade clear cell, would often experience recurrence? Was that part of the
So
characterization?
with ovarian cancer, it's a pretty high, it's almost I think 70% chance of doesn't matter what kind of ovarian cancer you have that you have a chance of recurrence. It's more of being stage 3. It's kind of like you have like a very like it's like I don't even know like I should know the statistics of how much of a chance of you're making it to 5 years. So it kind of was one of those things that it's a very high recurrence rate. It's a very aggressive cancer, especially being high grade. Like there's different ones where for mine, I'm gonna more likely to develop like a tumor that comes back, whereas the low grade, there's more chance of it just being muddled and having these spots and these lesions and that stuff that's just everywhere and it's slow growing and you just kind of all of a sudden have bad disease. So it's kind of just with all ovarian cancer, it's just it's very aggressive. It's very hard to determine it and detect it. And it's kind of there's no okay, just do this and you're great, or just have your ovaries removed and you're not going to get it again. And then some girls it's do this and it helps make it not come back, and other girls it's do this and it makes it. So there's very much where it's it's kind of I feel like it's a very underfunded, under researched kind of topic that I honestly myself didn't know anything about ovarian cancer beforehand, so I feel that it's just very very much you kind of delve into it and it's like, oh my god, this is very serious, and this is very, why do we not know more about this? It's just, it's crazy. And so for me it was do nothing or do something. And I'm like, we can do chemo every like 3 months or something like that, and just kind of do a little bit of chemo every once in a while just to keep things at bay. I'm fine with that.
You're the do something girl.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We're going to shift over now and talk about the advocacy and the mental health and the strength and resilience that you showed in this last clip. So hang tight.